Okay, this is going to be a personal share, part 3 of this journey into the shift into what my other videos I called the no self shift. Oh yeah, and yes, you're not going crazy. My hair color has changed dramatically. Yeah, it's a little red and it's a little too short, but it'll grow. Yeah, you know, this thing, getting older in this, it's a global, maybe it's not a global phenomenon, but I'm pretty sure it is. Boy, when you get older, 50s or so, or you have gray hair, you absolutely become invisible to everybody, not just the opposite sex. And I know it's true for men and women. So I decided that I was tired of being a ghost and ignored by everyone. So I thought I'd put a little fire on the crown. But it's a little too fiery. But anyway, okay, so today, yeah, I want to share a little bit more about this shift to no self. If I recall, the other videos were speaking more of the phenomena, and I remember feeling very disoriented, kind of didn't know what the heck was going on. And this feels kind of like a little bit more purging and integration, settling down, like the phenomena has settled down. In fact, it's gone. And apparently that's part of this transition. And I'm also going to share with you a book. I'll show it to you right now. I hope you can see that. Our Natural Potential by David Buckland. Everybody should get this book. It's like the entire guide of all the stages of awakening and what you experience and what they mean, and sort of the upheaval that comes with them. And it is a brilliant book. And it's as if, I haven't read the entire book, and it's very easy to read, so it's not too technical. He's done a brilliant job. God, this book saved my life, helping me understand what was going on, and you'll hear that in a second. Anyway, great book. I was going to say something else and I can't remember. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, this book, it's almost as if my soul went, and we're going to experience all your awakenings based on this textbook. So this is like my journey of awakenings, which I have to tell you now, in this stage, I'm beginning to question whether I even woke up. And I'm perfectly willing to entertain that truth. Maybe I never have woken up. Maybe the ego, I've been totally buffooned by the ego. I know that's not the right word, but you know, bamboozled by the ego. I don't know what's going on. Thank goodness for this book. It's helping me to understand. But I have to tell you, this stage, I'm in a place of I don't know anything, and I don't know what's going on, and I doubt that I ever woke up or had an awakening. And maybe I had these awakenings, I sure had some experiences. Maybe they were never stable. I don't know. This is how confusing this stage is. Anyway, this book is great. And even though I personally appear to have gone a very progressive path, like following this step and then this step and then this step, people are just popping all over the place. And so while I took the progressive journey from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, you may go from 0 to 10, 0 to 5, 5 to 2, 10 to 5. Apparently, there are some progressive steps, but ultimately you can hit all these stages in different times. There's no set order. So you may be in no self right now and have no idea. Okay, so this is a really good book to help you understand. Okay, so What was I going to tell you? So this, okay. So I was calling this the no self stage, and Adyashanti and some other people from the Zen and I think Buddhist traditions call it the no self because they don't recognize the term Brahman. But this shift in consciousness is really called Brahman, and it's mistakenly called sometimes Brahman consciousness, but that's kind of an oxymoron because what I'm now beginning to understand because of this book and David himself, we've had some email exchanges, is that this no self stage or Brahman stage is beyond consciousness. So who knew? Anyway, so that's what this shift is about. It's a stage of Brahman. You've stepped beyond consciousness, and it's unlike all the other previous awakenings. All the previous awakenings are happening within consciousness. It's about consciousness awaking to itself. And when we speak of consciousness, we're speaking of Shakti, I think. I may not have all of this right, but this is, I'm kind of learning as I go. The manifested Shiva Shakti stuff, and Brahman is outside of all of that. So before I read you some of the book, I'll just tell you kind of how I've been feeling. So I didn't know any of this. And what I was feeling after the phenomena, I was so baffled. My mind just kept going, what is this? What is this? It's trying to figure it out. And right, the mind cannot figure anything out beyond consciousness because it's not, doesn't exist. What I was feeling and what I still feel is I feel hollow, empty. Now there's an aliveness there. Believe me, there's some aliveness and vastness, but internally and in feeling wise, I feel empty. Like one of those rice cakes that people would eat when they're on a diet. It's like, and it tastes like nothing. You're dry. Or like, I feel more like an empty toilet paper roll, just kind of like a shell and nothing else, just dry air. And you feel nothing. And this feeling nothing was really concerning me. It still concerns me. It doesn't concern me. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't feeling anything anymore, feeling like this connection with things, in unity, or in all the other levels or stages in consciousness. You have you can have a connection with things. You can feel an intimacy with things. And that goes away apparently in Brahman. And I didn't know this. So I was the mind was like, what's going on? You're asleep. You've totally been bamboozled. You've been lying to people. You don't know what's going on. It's a crazy feeling. But apparently it is part of this shift. When you step outside of beyond consciousness, and David in email exchanges described that he went through the same thing. You lose all intimacy with life because your perception is now beyond consciousness. And you can't, it's beyond existence. So I don't know how to explain this. So there's like no intimate connection anymore, which is kind of a bummer because I suspect all of us, in the beginning of our journeys, where it's that longing to feel love and connection. And, really that is an ego desire, but you want to feel all that great stuff, right? And apparently that's an attachment as well, that you have to kind of get beyond your attachment to feeling and move. I think what he's talking about in this shift, you're refining or detaching from the feeling or the emotional connection with things and refining your sense perception. And that's kind of all that's left, is your sense perception. Honestly, I'm probably all wrong in how I'm describing this, because I'm in it and I don't understand it. I don't have the retrospect perspective. But anyway, it's a trip. This stage for me is the WTF stage. Why did I ever get on the spiritual journey if this is what it's all about? You know, you lose that loving feeling. Apparently it comes back in a different way, but this is quite a shocker. Let's see, what else? And at this stage, what's happening, what's coming up for more purging, it's very little mental story. There's no more story from the ego. There's still some mental things that are connected, but very little. The mind is still really very, very quiet. You know, when I'm just living my life, it's pretty darn quiet. Emotional body has really tamped down. Boy, when I had that big shift in unity, it was like all hell broke loose. And that's really settling down. And what's coming up now seems to be, and David talks about this, it's cellular, what the body's been holding on to. And these are the things that come when you're in the womb and several years after being born. And it's stuff that there's no cognition to it. It's cellular memory. And perhaps you're receiving the energies of anger and depression or frustration from parents, but you're not labeling it and creating a story of that at that time. Your body's just holding on to it. Later on in your teen years, then you create an emotional attachment to that, and you create a story out of it because you have mental and emotional cognition and memories kicking in. I'm probably not saying any of that right either, but I think you catch my drift. So that's the kind of stuff that's coming up. It's like the same issues keep coming up and coming up as you go through this spiritual journey. You superficially work on the mental patterns first, and then as you more deeply awaken, you hit the emotional body, and the same issues keep coming up, and maybe they have a different flavor. But the deeper you go and hit this stage, you really hit your core wounds, which are the same, which at the core have been holding all these same issues. But you find at the core, there's a core reason that doesn't match all the stories your ego mind created about it. Does that make sense? So you have these core wounds, and what I'm finding for me personally, what's come up is, these core things, like I have from childhood, who knew this? I have this feeling of, I'm trapped here. I don't want to be here. Get me out of here. You know, I hate this life. I'm so frustrated, and all this anger. I mean, it was as if I was born with it. And I was born with all this anger and frustration and not wanting to be here, feeling trapped in this life, in this body, and in my environment. And as I was growing up, these feelings that were just stored in my cells, my ego created stories about those feelings regarding me and my self-worth and where they came from, that I'm not good enough, or nobody wanted me, or I was a mistake, all those stories. But now what I'm finding is when I checked in with the body. Now, see, when you get down to this level, when the body's holding on to core wounds in the cellular, before you reach cognition and memory ability, you can't ask the mental body, or even the emotional body to tell you where these came from. You have to ask the body, and you will get images of where they came from. And what I got was, oh, this happened in the womb, and it came from my father. Oh, I didn't know. Apparently, this was an affair situation, and I think he felt trapped. I mean, I think he eventually married my mother, but I think he always had suicidal and depressive tendencies. And what I received was his feeling trapped. Number one, he felt that, I was born out of sin. He made a mistake, like had an affair. So that sin energy came into me, feeling trapped, and I saw it. I felt it. I saw the image that it all came from him. So none of those stories that my ego mind created were false, absolutely false. And so I saw that it was all of his inner energy that penetrated me while in the womb. As well as I saw, now whether it's true or not, whether it happened, doesn't matter. The body will create images to help you have some understanding. And I needed understanding where all this anger and I have a very jumpy, like when I hear loud noises or things, I have a lot of fear. I just do this. And what the body showed me is I saw my father slap my mother, and that image, immediately I felt her anger and her frustration. It just like poured out of my body. It wasn't mine. So now I understand where all this stuff comes from. And then I saw a little baby being shaken, like it heard a loud noise, and I saw the baby. I'm assuming the baby was me. You know how they do that little shaking thing when they get scared? Well, I retained that. So all of these images are coming up, and these are core things. And so in this stage, these very core, deep issues come up, and you would think that it would be a more dramatic, like, painful thing, but actually you go deeper, but the resolution of it is more refined and easier. It's like, oh, I see you now. This anger isn't mine. This fear, this being easily startled and afraid isn't mine. Didn't come from me. And this feeling of being trapped here in this life and like, oh, I don't want to be here, wasn't mine either. And it's like the recognition of that, it was like everything just released so gently. Of course, it may come back, but I don't see that there's no emotionality to it. It was like, oh, great. So this is really a stage where things get deeper, but more refined. And this is the best part of this stage of clearing. Okay, what else do I want to tell you? I think I'll just read a little bit, if you don't mind, from the book to help you understand what this stage is about. So, again, I'm reading from this book, David Buckland. This is Beyond Consciousness, the Brahman Stage. The Vedas call this the Great Awakening. Brahman means the great and is prior to consciousness, prior to intelligence, and prior to existence itself. Who knew? Who knew you could experience, and I think experience is the wrong word, perceive life from before existence itself? It's mind-boggling. The mind can't even comprehend this. Okay. So this beyond consciousness, it is neither self nor non-self, neither being nor non-being, neither consciousness nor non-consciousness. Universe, creation, self, being, presence, all these qualities are all features of consciousness. It is beyond all of this, beyond all descriptions. It is pure nothingness. And I so needed to hear that, because I kept thinking, I'm so empty, I'm nothing, but there's still a weird fullness, but there's nothing here, okay? And he says right here, but this nothing is not an absence, it is totality. In a way, we can say Brahman has a meta-existence, but it is not the being we knew prior, meaning consciousness, all those levels of consciousness prior. And it is equally true, it is without quality. It is without that quality that we previously experienced, because it is without any qualities. That's why you don't feel anything. You don't feel any qualities of this awareness. It's crazy. Okay. I'll keep reading if you don't mind. It says, because we have transcended the covering value of consciousness, but are very used to living within the dynamics of consciousness, Brahman is a big shift. It is without experience. Even the process of experience collapses when we step beyond consciousness. And he says, describing this stage is quite paradoxical, because you can't describe something you're not experiencing. Okay? So you can understand, like, I had no idea why I wasn't feeling, nothing was going on. I thought, it's like you think you're asleep and the mind's going to tell you you're just asleep. You're just as unconscious as you were, whenever. Thank God for this book. It saved me from literally going cuckoo. Let's see. So, as we said earlier, in the previous stages, consciousness is learning, is becoming aware of itself. Oh, this is what he said. Where before it was consciousness knowing itself, now it is Brahman that is the knower of Brahman. We could say Brahman is conscious of itself, but it is not the flowing consciousness of Atman, as it was in unity. It is simply alert to its own nature. So this is a stage of pure alertness without experience. Wow. I mean, be careful what you wish for. Okay. Now I understand my deepest longing for as long as I can remember, since childhood, was to be totally absorbed and a totally clear vessel for God, for universe, for God. I like the word God, because to me it means totality. And do you think that that means that you're going to have all of this love and whatever? But it's not. If your inner longing, and you're using these words, being totally absorbed in a clear vessel, then your soul, I don't even want to say soul, but your soul is really longing, apparently, for Brahman, the stage of Brahman. So be prepared. I mean, and if you're experiencing something like this, total alertness without experience, maybe you're in Brahman. And remember that this is a totality experience. So, first of all, your default, or my default, is this pure alertness. And this pure alertness contains both paradoxes, all the paradoxes, or dichotomies, I think paradoxes is the right word, of feeling a self, and then being the self, and seeing life from the meta position. And it's simultaneously happening. It's so weird. And I think I said this in the other video, things feel more real, more physical, like more 3D. It's like, oh, they have more 3D-ness, while at the same time, they seem like little miniatures or something and not real at all, like nothing's really there. So you're experiencing Brahman and Brahman within this reality. And the clouds are going in and out, so it's getting kind of dark in here. Anyway, I'll just keep talking. Yeah, so it's a strange feeling. But because it is total, so that's the default position. But because it is totality, you can access all those other levels. It is kind of a slight effort, right? But you do have access to all those other levels. Sorry, I'm going dark here. The clouds are coming in. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So there is an ability to kind of tap into more of a unified feeling, but default is pure alertness. Here's another thing that he talks about, which I totally was feeling and I didn't understand what was going on. Oh yeah, he says, so this thing about things not seeming more real, but then like they're not here at all. He talks about this. From this perspective, the world is not an illusion. It has never come into existence. So in self-realization, I experience this, and everybody does. You reach this perspective and you go, oh, the world's an illusion. And you totally feel and see everything is illusory. It's all an illusion. I remember that stage. This stage is completely different. It's like it never existed. Nothing is there. So strange. Interesting, isn't it? So it says here, something made from nothing will always be nothing. But the word nothing does not describe the profundity of totality. It is not an emptiness, just a no-thingness. It is self-evident to itself alone. What he's talking about now is like beyond my understanding, but it's quite an interesting shift. Let's see. He talks about this shift can happen prior to the unfoldment of much refined perception. So it can happen at any time. So if you're feeling these things, rest assured you're not going cuckoo. What else do I want to tell you about this? He talks about, so yes, he talks about that he went through what I was saying before. I feel like a rice cake or a empty toilet paper roll. This is part of the integration, that this is such a huge shift, not only for your stuff, but it's a shift for the body as well. I mean, the body is used to functioning within consciousness, but now all of a sudden your perception has gone from consciousness to before consciousness or beyond consciousness of the body. Anyway, he said that he had many years of integration of total dryness, like nothing was happening. And that totally reassured me that this dryness and nothing happening is all part of the integration. And what it's doing is it is freeing you. I'm freeing myself from the attachment to feeling and moving more into pure alertness. And that's a long refining process. Let's see, he also talks about so this stage, here's another experience. This is why I also thought, sorry I'm all over the place, but that's how I roll. I really thought I had gone completely unconscious and had never ever woke up, because pure being in this body, let's see, how do I want it? You just act. There's just a doingness. And remember, all of these awakenings or shifts in consciousness have nothing to do with the personality. The personality is going to still be cranky or whatever your issue is. The personality doesn't get any better. I mean, it does. You can do self-development, but that's in your mind. Anyway, I'm experiencing myself just behaving, just doing, talking to people, and the ego and the personality is just doing its thing. And there's no longer a witness. There's no longer a mind going, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or you know what I'm talking about. That observer or that mind telling you, don't do this. There's like no awareness of that anymore. It's just pure being working through this personality and not criticizing it. Now, it's not to say that the behavior of the personality doesn't have its faults. Believe me, that's what it does. And that's why I was questioning, what is going on? I'm kind of reacting this way, and it's an old conditioned pattern of the body. But in the moment, there's, like right now, I'm just babbling away, and there's nothing in my mind going, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. Okay, I'm just, pure being is just working through this personality. Now, of course, when I'm not in a doing phase, I can go, oh, right. Now I can have some self-reflection. And there's still pure being. In order to, you have to have, they call it lesha vidya, faint remains of ignorance, or in my case, a big, huge chunk of ignorance or ego. You have to remain some chunks of ego for pure being to work through. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So it's really your karma, your blind spot. Actually, David says, karma isn't in your blind spot, it is your blind spot. And he says, as long as you're in the body, you still hold karma. So this stage, you still will have karma. The body needs, pure being needs karma in order to have a vehicle to work through. Now, of course, some of that karma will get resolved and refined, but you'll still retain things. And this explains why we have gurus behaving badly, or anybody, because it's your blind spot. You don't see it. And the personality just keeps going because pure being needs that. And once all that gets refined, then you no longer need to have a body, right? Some beings will, the beings that choose to be bodhisattvas, I think that's the right term, they can carry a body, come back and use a body for pure being, but I think they have to have something. But anyway, this describes why we have some of our greatest, Amma, Ramana Maharshi, and all these great teachers, then they all, Rajneesh or Osho, all have these areas, whether they drink, smoke, have cancer, have like angry little outbursts all the time. Like I hear Amma can be really like, oh, angry and then fine, because they need that. It's their blind spot. It's their karma. Well, I've got a bigger chunk than obviously those people. Woo. Anyway, so it's fascinating to just watch myself just function without that voice, the ego. Okay. So here's the good part. All of this, apparently there's something beyond Brahman. So you go through this dry stage, and then what happens, you're letting go of all this stuff, and there's a stage after this called para-Brahman. Who knew? And this is the stage that when you've purified a little bit more, your gifts and cities start awakening or come in, and now you become more of a purer expression of pure being, right? You know, you let go a little bit more of the ego stuff, and now your cities come online, or your gifts. And you begin working now on behalf of the collective. You may still have that one or several karmic things that, you know, you're blind to, and you're still going to behave badly over here. But for the most part, your gifts come online, and apparently more feeling comes back, and your sensory perception becomes much more refined. So no worries. I'm not worried, I don't think. You eventually will get out of this real empty toilet paper roll stage, the dry stage, and you move into para-Brahman. But it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed all this information. I hope it helped you. And I really recommend that book. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye.